Hey there. So glad you found your way to my channel. Can't sleep tonight? Don't worry, I'm here with you. Let's spend this time together with some quiet stories, real ones from real people all around the world. If you enjoy what you hear, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to join our little midnight community. Now, let's begin our journey together. However, the legal proceedings did not end there. There was still the matter of Laura Simonson's death to address. Stephen Zellick, now 55 years old, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder with intent for killing 37-year-old Laura Simonson and received a 25-year prison sentence. While the judge acknowledged Stephen's cooperation, it was determined that he deserved the maximum sentence for the charges. Judge Pamela King became emotional as she addressed him, saying, "Mr. Zellick, human life is not something to be played with. Laura Simonson was loved and valued by those who called her mom, daughter, sister, and friend. You're going to remain in prison long enough that no other woman will be harmed at your hands." Some of Laura's family members expressed disappointment that he did not receive the maximum possible sentence of 40 years, with her daughter referring to him as a monster and stating, "While he rots in a cell, maybe he'll realize what kind of pain and suffering he's brought to so many people." His lawyer stated that he was deeply remorseful and had entered the plea to prevent further trauma for Laura's family. He will serve the Minnesota sentence after completing his sentence in Wisconsin. These are consecutive sentences, ensuring Stephen Zellick will remain incarcerated for life. Both Laura and Jenny were mothers who had experienced significant challenges in their lives. Laura's sister Nikki reflected, "My mother aches for the daughter she lost. She constantly wonders, what if? What if I did this, or what if I did that? Would that have saved Laura from this monster? It won't bring Laura and Jenny back, but it will give our families peace of mind that this monster can never prey on women again." In an essay Jenny wrote for a college class, she expressed, "Nothing in my life has been easy. Nothing has ever been given to me." She added that she aspired to become a social worker helping children in the foster care system, stating, "I want to make a difference in the world, and I'm still not sure how I'm going to do that." As awareness of these conditions spread, it prompted international concern and condemnation, along with a surge of individuals wanting to help. John Upton Jr. was among those moved to action. On October 5, 1990, John, like many others, was watching television when an ABC News 2020 report came on. The program showed thousands of children with various disabilities living in deplorable conditions. Deeply affected by what he witnessed, John decided to take immediate action. Just 4 days later, he arrived in Bucharest, Romania, meeting with officials with the goal of helping and saving as many children as possible. "The Romanian government has put these kids on the back burner," he said at the time. "However they want me to do it, I'll do it. But for God's sake, let me help these kids." What John initially thought would be a 2-week trip evolved into a 5-year mission. He visited the home hospital for irrecoverable children and later described his experience. "I was stunned by the misery and need there. I was equally stunned by the spirit of some of the children, surprised that it hadn't been beaten out of them." During his visit, he met a child named Isidore who grabbed his leg and expressed through an interpreter that he wanted to leave the orphanage. John spent the next 2 weeks searching for Isidore's biological parents, but found no information. After 6 weeks, it was time for John to return home. "As I said my goodbyes to the children, I promised to help," John recounted. "I sat down with Isidore. God led me to boldly guarantee that within 2 years, he'd be attending school in America." John later introduced the Ruckel family to footage of Isidore and another child named Isabella. The family promised that if possible, they would take in both children. John's staff in Romania helped the family make the necessary arrangements to bring them to the United States. Through his humanitarian efforts, John helped approximately 24 children leave these orphanages and come to the United States for treatment and eventual adoption. His work was featured in news reports and inspired many others to take similar action. There just wasn't any doubt in my mind that I could do something, that I could make a difference with these kids, he said in 1990. I didn't waste much time thinking about it. I just went. In later years, John's work shifted to address social issues within the United States. He focused on helping people with disabilities, survivors of abuse, and the elderly. His remarkable efforts in Romania ultimately contributed to freeing 5,000 children from orphanages. On the morning of Thursday, March 28, 2013, in Encinitas, San Diego, California, emergency operators began receiving calls reporting a shooting. At approximately 9 a.m., San Diego County Sheriff's deputies promptly responded to 2902 Lone Jack Road, where they found a man lying on the ground. A paramedic at the scene soon pronounced him deceased. The man was identified as 56-year-old John Upton Jr., who had been shot and killed. The individual who called 911 and admitted to the shooting was his neighbor, 61-year-old Michael Vilken. Michael was arrested and charged with premeditated murder and assault with a deadly weapon. He was held without bail. As investigators began piecing together the events, they learned that Michael had come to the United States in 1987, having previously worked as an economist in Georgia in the former Soviet Union. In 2008, he purchased an undeveloped lot spanning 2.5 acres on Lone Jack Road as a gift for his wife, Tamara. The couple lived 3 miles away in an apartment, and Michael's plan was to obtain a construction loan, build on the lot, and later sell the property. He typically spent 5 or 6 days a week there, usually from 3 to 8 in the evening, clearing the land. He also allowed neighbors to use the property for parking their cars or walking their dogs. In April 2011, John had begun renting a house with his girlfriend, Evelyn Zeller, with whom he had been in a relationship for about 2.5 years. Their house was on Lone Jack Road, adjacent to Michael's land. An easement ran across a private road on Michael's lot, allowing neighbors access to their homes. The owner of the house John was renting, a man named John Bonanno, had become friends with John Upton. John Bonanno had met Michael in 2010 and described their interaction as cordial. In autumn of 2012, John Upton called his landlord early one Saturday, asking him to speak with Michael. John believed Michael was on his landlord's property and complained that Michael would not stop cutting bushes and chopping things into small pieces. When his landlord arrived, the two of them spoke to Michael. John Upton asked Michael to complete the work he was doing, suggesting that he either obtain a permit and begin building or sell the property, as the constant cutting of shrubs was becoming irritating to him. John Bonanno reported that Michael told them he was finished clearing the lot. He mentioned that during this conversation, Michael was clenching his fist while holding a shovel and appeared visibly angry. Despite Michael moving closer to them during this exchange, neither John Upton nor John Bonanno moved away. On August 17, 2012, Michael purchased a .22 caliber pistol, but later decided he needed a more powerful weapon, feeling that this smaller caliber would not stop a larger person. He had researched various options online and read reviews, uncertain whether to purchase a pistol or a revolver. San Diego County Deputy Sheriff Scott Hill spoke with Michael by phone on October 31, 2012, when Michael inquired about specific laws regarding carrying and using firearms. Michael explained to the deputy that he wanted this information due to a property dispute with a neighbor. Specifically, he was developing a property and wanted to install a driveway, but the neighbor was concerned that the proposed driveway would require removing some vegetation he had planted. Michael told the deputy that his neighbor had not taken any aggressive actions toward him. Deputy Hill was concerned by this inquiry, as it suggested potential for violence. He noted that Michael could not provide a reasonable explanation for his significant concern about his safety or why he had gone to the extent of purchasing a firearm and wanting to carry it. Deputy Hill explained to Michael that he could not offer legal advice. When Michael presented several reasons based on his research justifying why he could carry a firearm on the property, Deputy Hill suggested he might want to consult with a lawyer. The deputy emphasized that carrying a firearm when anticipating an argument was a very bad idea, especially when no threats had been made. He added that Michael could face arrest and criminal charges if he made poor choices. About a week later, Deputy Hill and his partner were completing their work at an apartment complex near Michael's home when Michael approached them. He began asking the same questions to Deputy Hill's partner that he had asked Deputy Hill. Deputy Hill informed him that he was the officer Michael had spoken with the previous week. According to Deputy Hill, Michael seemed to want confirmation that it was acceptable to carry a firearm. Once again, Deputy Hill advised him to consult a lawyer and reiterated that he could not provide legal advice. Vince Sampo, who had been hired by Michael in late 2012 to survey the lot, had asked Michael to remove approximately 3 feet of vegetation in one area. Vince recounted that when he was at the lot in November 2012 and Michael walked him to his car, the trunk was open, and Michael showed him a long silver pistol in its case, saying, "I have this gun." Michael mentioned he had purchased it because he felt threatened by a neighbor. Vince stated that seeing the gun made him uncomfortable and frightened. Evelyn said that John had never complained about Michael. Instead, he would praise Michael's work ethic. John's daughter later mentioned that she spoke with her father regularly and had never even heard Michael Vilkin's name. However, not everyone shared this view. Other neighbors told media representatives off camera that John would frequently taunt Michael from his balcony. San Diego County Deputy Sheriff Marshall Abbott was dispatched to the lot on March 21, 2013. Michael explained that he had called because the surveyor needed to clear some brush, and he wanted to avoid a confrontation, adding that he felt threatened by John. When the deputy asked why he felt this way and requested examples, Michael said that John had yelled at him and they had argued about cutting down brush, though no physical contact had occurred between them. The deputy did not consider this to constitute a criminal threat. Deputy Abbott asked John to move his car, as the surveyor had requested, and John complied, appearing frustrated but remaining calm. The deputy advised him to contact the sheriff's department if he experienced any issues with Michael and to avoid physical confrontations. As they continued their conversation, Michael approached, and whatever he said clearly annoyed John, who used profanity and told Michael not to come any closer. The deputy de-escalated the situation and advised both men to avoid physical conflict and to call the sheriff's department instead if issues arose. On Thursday, March 28, 2013, the day of the shooting, which was also Evelyn's birthday, John woke her around 6 a.m. to wish her a happy birthday. He also shared the sad news that his mother had passed away a few hours earlier. Though this news was upsetting, John felt a sense of relief that she was no longer suffering. Around 9 a.m., Evelyn heard 2 loud, sharp sounds that she believed were separated by 5 to 7 seconds. When she called out for John and received no response, she felt a sense of dread. She went outside and saw Michael, approximately 25 feet away, talking on the phone. She asked him about the sounds she had heard. He acknowledged her, but then walked behind a bush, out of sight. Evelyn then noticed two workers running down the street. She called to them in Spanish, asking what had happened. They didn't know, but indicated where the sounds had originated, from the footpath. As Evelyn walked up the path, she discovered John lying on the ground. He had been shot in the stomach and the head. She then heard Michael say, "Don't get any fucking closer." Looking up, she saw Michael standing about 8 feet away, pointing what she described as a large revolver at her. He appeared calm and composed. Evelyn immediately raised her hands, waited momentarily, and then ran back to the house, where she called 911. Michael also called 911. When officers arrived, he was still speaking with the dispatcher, and the officers instructed him to end the call. As the murder investigation began, John's loved ones faced an incomprehensible tragedy. John's brother spoke the following day. "I think yesterday was the hardest day of my life. My mom passed away from cancer, and just a few hours later, my brother was murdered." Evelyn and John had been planning to move out the next day. "We found our dream home," Evelyn said. That's what he went out to say. Investigators reported that Michael spoke openly with officers that day. He mentioned that it had been over 40 years since he had served in the Soviet armed forces and acknowledged that he might not have been able to hit the head accurately with the first shot. He reportedly asked deputies why John hadn't fallen immediately after the initial shot. A black .44 caliber revolver was recovered from the crime scene. Michael told detectives that over the previous year, John had verbally confronted him because John was concerned about his privacy if Michael cut back the trees and bushes. Michael stated that he had been there to cut bushes on the path leading to his property, but John wasn't pleased with this. "He wanted my road to serve as his private garden," Michael told authorities. "I decided to go there and cut the trees and to show who's the boss." The investigator's statement provided a troubling account of the events. Michael had hired 2 workers to cut the bushes, and while they were working, he was hiding on his property where he could observe both the workers and John's front door. When Michael saw John looking out from the front door, he removed the revolver from its case and placed it in his waistband. Michael recounted, "He came out, and he went around and started walking to me. When he was about 10 feet, he told me, 'I don't remember those expletives. I was under stress.' He pulled a pistol and I pulled my gun. I shot the way I was trained in the Army." However, one significant detail in this account was not accurate. John did not have a firearm on his person, and he had not drawn a pistol. Michael spoke about the incident from prison, maintaining that he had done nothing wrong. During a jailhouse interview with local news, Michael showed little remorse for shooting his neighbor. He claimed that John had been armed with a gun, but prosecutors later stated this was not the case. The only item John had in his hand was a cell phone. Michael's wife, Tamara, who arrived frantically at the crime scene, acknowledged that police had been called to resolve a dispute between the 2 men a week before the shooting. When the case went to trial, Michael's defense argued, "This case was justified self-defense. Mr. Vilken protected his life." Michael testified that John's body language conveyed the message, "Don't cut the trees here." He added, "When he was talking to me angrily, it was like, 'Stop cutting trees.'" When it was suggested that he might have been lying in wait, Michael responded, "If I wanted to wait for him, I would not cut the bushes. I would hide in the bushes, and with a rifle, I would wait in the bushes." Michael testified that he had conducted between 22 and 50 internet searches regarding firearms, including searches for low-noise pistols. He explained this was because coyotes were present on his property, and if he needed to shoot one, he didn't want to disturb or frighten the neighbors. During cross-examination, the prosecutor argued that John had actually been turning away when the second shot was fired. Michael stated that he didn't see John turning his back to him. The prosecutor then played an interview that police had conducted with Michael, in which he had told authorities that John had turned as if to avoid the second bullet. When asked why he hadn't given John a chance, Michael replied, "I did not have a chance. I mean, an option, except to shoot." Evelyn testified that a few months before the shooting, John had shown her a gun, something she hadn't previously known he owned. She told him to get rid of it and confirmed that on the day of the shooting, he didn't have a gun. He was only carrying his phone. Evelyn described the morning of March 28th. It was her birthday, and also the day her live-in boyfriend was shot outside their home in rural Encinitas. She recounted approaching the path and seeing someone lying on the ground. As she moved closer, she realized it was John. She then noticed her neighbor, Michael, with a .44 Magnum in his hand. "All I remember is his hand stretched out and the gun pointing at me," she testified. "I wasn't scared for my life. All I saw was a dead body, and there was no more spirit in the body, even from the distance that I saw it at. And I turned around, I did a 180, threw my hands up, and ran back in the house." The two workers who had been present that day also testified. They described John as a nice person and noted that John had offered to move his SUV. They confirmed that Michael had instructed them, "If someone came out, don't worry about getting involved. He would take care of it." A witness for the prosecution also testified that he had not heard John being threatening, nor had he heard an argument taking place. The trial encountered a complication when the judge was required to dismiss a juror after they had conducted their own experiments related to the case. This meant that deliberations had to begin anew. Eventually, the verdict was announced. Michael Vilken was found guilty of murder in the first degree and assault with a deadly weapon for pointing the gun at Evelyn. As the verdict was read, he displayed little emotion. Michael received a sentence of 64 years to life. At the sentencing hearing, John's daughter expressed her anguish over the entire ordeal, saying she couldn't understand how someone could take another person's life and show no remorse. "My father will never meet his grandchildren, and this guy will die in jail, all for what? 2 lives are gone, and we're here left to pick up the pieces." Michael indicated his intention to appeal the verdict. The judge denied a motion to reduce the murder conviction to voluntary manslaughter, stating, "I believe the jury understood his position." They rejected it. John's father, John Sr., later filed a legal claim seeking $5 million in damages, $1 million in special damages, and reserved the right to pursue $10 million in punitive damages against Michael. In a statement filed on September 24th, John Sr. asserted that Michael had acted with premeditated malice and intentionally set out to murder John Upton Jr. in cold blood. This lawsuit was filed one day after a court hearing where Michael's behavior had caused considerable concern and anger. He repeatedly turned to look at John's family in the gallery, appearing to smirk and smile at them. Other family members also filed a lawsuit, arguing that Michael had acted willfully, maliciously, and recklessly, and that his actions had deprived them of love, companionship, and comfort. Their suit did not specify an amount for punitive and general damages. For those left behind, this tragedy remains incomprehensible. For a dispute of this nature to end in murder is difficult to understand, and regardless of what may have occurred, it should never have escalated to this point. John Upton Jr.'s memory continues through his family and loved ones, as well as through his remarkable work, helping those most vulnerable. As John's brother Michael said, John was a fearless crusader and someone who was always trying to find a way to make a difference in the world. His daughter Elizabeth, who stands as a testament to John's tireless work and endless dedication to those most in need, reflected, "I really knew from a very, very young age that you really can make a difference, because I saw my dad do it." Isidore Ruckel, who went on to become a dedicated advocate for orphans, maintains a website documenting this important work, which includes a section honoring John Upton Jr. It seems fitting to conclude with his tribute. John eventually helped over 24 Romanian orphans travel to the United States for medical care or adoption, fostering many of them in his own home, and inspired the rescue of thousands more. The Emmy-winning documentary filmmaker went on to advocate for domestic social justice issues and was the founder of Media for a Cause, a nonprofit dedicated to producing short documentaries free of charge for worthy causes. I miss my friend, and I look forward to reuniting with him in heaven one day.
In the quiet neighborhoods of Austin, Texas, where streets remain peaceful and doors often stay unlocked, a series of unfortunate events unfolded in December 2014. This is the story of Kathy Blair and the Shelton family, whose lives intersected through tragic circumstances that would eventually be solved through the diligent work of investigators with help from an unexpected piece of technology. Austin, Texas had always been known for its vibrant music scene, and among those who contributed to its rich culture was a woman named Kathy Blair. At 53 years of age, Kathy had established herself as a respected music teacher and the director of the Christian Choral Society of Austin, a program dedicated to homeschooled students. After experiencing 2 divorces, Kathy had found purpose and fulfillment in her work and in spending quality time with her children. Those who knew her described Kathy as someone with strong convictions, who always knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to pursue it. Her sister would later recall that Kathy was definitely the one in charge, unafraid to speak her mind when situations called for it. Music had been Kathy's passion since her youth, and when she relocated to Austin, she was determined to make it her career. Her home on the 4600 block of Tamarack Trail was situated in a quiet suburban area where neighbors knew one another just minutes away from the vibrant city atmosphere that Kathy also enjoyed being part of. In December 2014, Kathy's 23-year-old son Joseph had been staying with her while awaiting his assignment from the Navy. On December 6th, after spending the night with friends, Joseph returned home just after noon. The street appeared as peaceful as ever, and the house was quiet as he entered. Joseph checked each room for his mother before making his way to her bedroom. What he discovered there immediately prompted him to call emergency services. Police arrived promptly, securing the scene with investigation tape as homicide detectives began their work. Kathy Blair had been murdered in her own home, a scenario that seemed entirely out of place in this neighborhood. As investigators would later note, this area experienced very little crime, with nighttime burglaries being particularly unusual for someone to enter a home on such a quiet street where many residents owned firearms demonstrated a considerable level of risk. Those who knew Kathy struggled to imagine anyone who might wish to harm her. The evidence indicated she had been choked and stabbed and had fought back against her attacker before ultimately succumbing to a fatal slash to her throat. Examination of the scene revealed no signs of sexual assault. Blood on a light switch suggested Kathy had been asleep when the attack occurred in the middle of the night, with the assailant turning on the lights afterward to search the premises. Robbery appeared to be the motive, as Kathy's jewelry box had been emptied completely. However, other valuable items remained untouched. A laptop, a Kindle, and a phone had been left behind. This selective approach to theft made investigators question whether the scene might have been staged to appear as a random robbery when it was possibly a targeted attack. Joseph informed detectives that his mother typically left the back door unlocked, a common practice among residents of that street. This detail helped explain how the intruder had gained entry without forced access. While investigators quickly ruled out those closest to Kathy as potential suspects, they considered the possibility that whoever committed the crime likely knew about her habit of leaving the back door unsecured. Despite the amount of Kathy's blood at the scene, forensic technicians were unable to locate any DNA or fingerprints from the perpetrator, suggesting careful measures had been taken to avoid leaving evidence behind. Along with the jewelry, a pillowcase was missing, potentially used to carry the stolen items from the residence. Among the limited physical evidence was a bloody shoe impression on the floor, identified as a size 10, of a recognizable brand, a significant clue that investigators hoped might lead to the responsible party. 5 days after her murder, approximately 100 of Kathy's students gathered to perform the Christmas concert they had been rehearsing with her for 6 months. Despite their grief, they were determined not to disappoint their beloved teacher. The performance was filled with emotion, as every student Kathy had taught past and present attended to either participate or show support. One parent expressed how proud they all were of how the children had managed to continue under such difficult circumstances, describing it as a tribute to Kathy's influence. The concert demonstrated the profound impact Kathy had made on thousands of lives throughout her career. Her funeral was scheduled for December 20th, allowing the community additional time to process their loss. As mourners said goodbye to the respected music teacher, investigators received an intriguing call from one of Kathy's neighbors named Rob. Approximately 12 hours before Joseph discovered his mother's body at precisely 1:16 a.m., Rob had been outside his house testing a new thermal scope for his camera. This specialized equipment detects radiation and can produce clear images even in complete darkness. Rob had been filming deer when he noticed a car pulling up just down the road. He observed someone exit the vehicle and walk toward Kathy's house. An individual who appeared tall, with broad shoulders, and what Rob considered an unusual walking pattern. Upon learning of Kathy's death, Rob recalled this observation and promptly provided the footage to authorities. Detectives reviewed the video and agreed it was concerning, as it showed the person walking directly into Kathy's front garden. This evidence established a time frame for the crime between 1:30 and 4:00 a.m. While specific facial features couldn't be discerned beyond the individual's build and distinctive gait, analysts believe the vehicle might have been a dark-colored Toyota. Just over a week after Kathy's death, investigators faced another troubling development. Police had been called to the 1700 block of Brentwood Street, a few miles from Kathy's residence, where 85-year-old Sidney Shelton and his 83-year-old wife, Billy, had been discovered murdered in their home. Their nurse had arrived to find them beaten and strangled beside one another in bed. Billy had suffered multiple stab wounds to her face, with a knife still lodged in her eye. Similar to Kathy's bedroom, the Sheltons' room had been thoroughly searched, with jewelry boxes emptied and drawers pulled out. The same detectives assigned to Kathy's case immediately noticed the striking similarities between the crime scenes. Sidney and Billy Shelton had been married for 64 years and had enjoyed 25 years of retirement surrounded by their large family. They lived quietly, finding joy in spending time with their grandchildren and attending church. Their pastor described them as warm-hearted, precious people who loved their neighborhood and being around children, reliable individuals who had been looking forward to celebrating Christmas with their family. The parallel nature of these crimes led investigators to consider whether they might be dealing with a serial killer. Though no apparent connection existed between Kathy Blair and the Sheltons, the nearly identical characteristics of both crimes suggested a possible link. During conversations with Kathy's friends, detectives learned that she had previously mentioned feeling uncomfortable around a handyman who had performed work in her home. Kathy had told the friend that this individual made her feel so uneasy that she never wanted him to return. When investigators approached Kathy's landlord about this person, they were given the name Timothy Parlin. At 49 years old, Timothy was on parole after serving time for various offenses, including jewelry thefts. His criminal record was extensive, with his combined sentences amounting to more than 20 years of incarceration. Beyond, on performing odd jobs around town. Timothy worked at a 7-Eleven convenience store and resided in an extended stay hotel with his wife. When police visited Timothy's residence, they immediately noticed that his height and build did not match the figure captured in the thermal scope footage outside Kathy's home. Timothy refused to allow officers inside, claiming his wife would become upset, but provided a DNA sample and offered an alibi for the time periods in question. He stated he had been working at 7-Eleven during those days and hadn't returned home until late. Investigators soon discovered that Timothy's alibi was false, prompting them to return to the hotel. Though Timothy wasn't present, his wife welcomed the officers inside for a conversation. She revealed that both she and Timothy knew the Shelton couple from church, and she was familiar with Kathy Blair from news reports. Timothy's wife then directed investigators to a receipt for a necklace that Timothy had pawned approximately 12 hours after Kathy's death. This discovery convinced detectives of Timothy's involvement. Surveillance footage from the pawn shop clearly showed Timothy and the vehicle. He was driving his sister's dark green Toyota. After obtaining a warrant to impound the car, officers discovered blood on the passenger seat. DNA analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Kathy Blair. Following an intensive interrogation, Timothy told detectives they should speak with someone named Sean Gant, Ben Alcazar. According to Timothy, this individual was responsible not only for Kathy's death, but also for the murders of Billy and Sidney Shelton. While Timothy admitted to planning to rob both homes, he maintained that he was only interested in valuables, repeatedly insisting that these hands didn't kill anyone. During a search of Timothy's hotel room, officers found drugs, allowing them to hold him on a parole violation while they investigated this new name, which they initially suspected might be fabricated. A background check revealed that Sean Gant, Ben Alcazar, did exist, but had no criminal record, worked as a teacher, and lived more than 3 hours away from both crime scenes. Detectives located Sean and requested an interview. He appeared tired and somewhat disoriented, explaining that he had recently taken Valium and expressed concern that police might pressure him into making false statements. Investigators, genuinely believing Sean was uninvolved, emphasized at the beginning of the interview that his participation was voluntary and he could leave at any time. Their hope was to quickly eliminate him as a suspect and refocus on Timothy. As they had anticipated, Sean initially denied any knowledge of the murders, but did acknowledge being in Austin and staying with Timothy during the time of the homicides. He explained that he knew Timothy because his sister was dating Timothy's nephew, an unlikely connection that raised questions. Sean's account began to change repeatedly, and he eventually admitted that he and Timothy had stopped in Kathy's neighborhood in the early morning hours of December 6th for no specific reason. According to Sean, Timothy entered what turned out to be Kathy's house and returned, covered in blood, carrying a pillowcase filled with jewelry. Recognizing that extracting the complete truth would take time, detectives paused for a cigarette break. During this interval, they noticed Sean was wearing shoes that matched the bloody print found at the crime scene. They also observed that his height, build, and distinctive walking style corresponded with the figure captured in Rob's video footage. When the interview resumed, Sean changed his story once more and acknowledged being inside Kathy's house with the intention of robbing her while Timothy waited outside. He stated that he had entered through the unlocked back door, which he knew would be unsecured based on Timothy's information, and spent several minutes moving quietly from room to room in search of valuables. After nearly 5 hours of questioning, Sean confessed to killing Kathy Blair. He claimed that she had awakened and lunged at him, attempting to wrestle a knife from his grasp, resulting in a struggle during which he stabbed her in the neck. Sean stated that he had fled with the valuables and given them to Timothy to pawn. Though he made no mention of Billy and Sidney Shelton, investigators remained convinced that all three murders were connected. Sean's demeanor throughout the confession was notably detached, alternating between casual conversation and apparent boredom, as if the entire process was merely inconvenient. Investigators found themselves perplexed by his involvement, as he had received nothing in return. Timothy had taken all the stolen items without sharing any proceeds with Sean. Authorities arrested 30-year-old Sean and charged him with Kathy Blair's murder, while they strongly suspected his involvement in the Shelton cases. Insufficient evidence prevented them from filing additional charges at that time. However, they had enough to charge Timothy Parlin with all three murders. Under Texas law, being complicit in a crime can result in equal responsibility for the outcome, regardless of direct participation. Based on Timothy's statements about Sean's role in the killings, police charged him with capital murder in all three homicides, even though he may not have physically entered either residence. Investigators believed Timothy was not merely complicit, but was the architect of the crimes. The combined evidence: Sean's confession, Kathy's blood in Timothy's car, cell phone data placing them at the scenes, the pawned necklace, the shoe print, and Rob's video footage created a compelling case against both men. In public statements, law enforcement officials emphasized how unusual stranger murders were in Austin, noting how these violent crimes had deeply affected the community. They continued to request public assistance with any information related to the cases, focusing exclusively on bringing justice to the families of the three victims. Both men pleaded not guilty, and 3 years passed before their trials commenced. During this time, they continued to blame each other for the murders. Sean's defense strategy changed, claiming his confession had been fabricated under pressure from police. He argued that the Valium in his system had impaired his judgment and that he should not have been questioned so intensively under those circumstances. In April 2018, after 19 hours of deliberation, the judge in Sean's first trial declared a mistrial. The jury had failed to reach a unanimous verdict, with one member unwilling to accept the confession as valid evidence. This created considerable tension among the other jurors, who were convinced of Sean's guilt. One juror, who requested anonymity, reported that the dissenting member eventually stopped participating in discussions entirely. The remaining jurors had believed that the video of Sean's confession, with details that matched corroborated facts, would lead to a unanimous decision. A family spokesperson expressed the Blair family's frustration at being unable to obtain the justice they had anticipated from a guilty verdict. The prosecution then turned its attention to Timothy Parlin's trial, choosing not to pursue the death penalty. In his case, Timothy maintained that Sean had committed the murders without his knowledge and that he had merely pawned some jewelry for quick cash. In May 2018, after deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury found 53-year-old Timothy guilty on 5 counts of capital murder. He received a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. Family members expressed gratitude for the verdict, with one relative stating that while it would never bring their loved ones back, they might have saved someone else by removing Timothy from society. 6 months after the mistrial, Sean's second trial concluded with a conviction for capital murder in Kathy Blair's case. He received the same sentence as Timothy, life imprisonment without parole. Sean continued to maintain that his confession had been coerced and that Timothy was the actual killer. In 2020, he filed an appeal that proved unsuccessful. After 4 years and 3 trials, Travis County prosecutors had finally resolved 3 complex cases law enforcement had worked diligently, exploring every possibility regardless of the time required to achieve justice. Rob Cathy's neighbor, whose thermal video had provided crucial evidence, received commendation from the Austin Police Department. Detectives characterized Timothy and Sean as sadistic, greedy individuals, particularly noting Sean's apparent lack of motive beyond the taking of lives, as he had received no material benefit from the crimes. The case illustrated how greed, even with minimal potential gain, can motivate the most horrific acts of violence. Sydney and Billy Shelton had gone to bed looking forward to upcoming holiday celebrations with their grandchildren. They died together, frightened and vulnerable, unable to defend themselves. Kathy's sister later reflected on the permanent absence created by murder. At the end of the day, she's gone. I can't call her tonight. She observed that while time brings healing, the wound remains, and life continues with an awareness that something will always be missing. The story of these 3 lives, connected by tragedy, reminds us of the patient dedication of those who work to bring resolution to the most disturbing of human behaviors, offering what closure they can to those left behind. In the calm spring air of Oakland, California, April 2014, brought with it the gentle rustling of new leaves and the soft promise of warmer days. Among the residents of this city was 23-year-old Kimberly Robertson, a young woman who had recently relocated from Texas with her 2-year-old daughter. Kimberly had grown up in Dallas, attending Kimball High School before completing her education at ITT Technical Institute in DeSoto in December of 2013. After moving to Oakland, she had enrolled at Heald College in San Francisco, where she was studying in the criminal justice program, a field that interested her deeply. Those who knew Kimberly often spoke of her vibrant personality. She was fun-loving and outgoing, with a warm smile that brightened rooms. Above all else, she was devoted to her young daughter, for whom she dreamed of creating the best possible future. Perhaps this dedication stemmed from Kimberly's own childhood experiences. When she was just 2 years old, her mother had been shot and killed by a boyfriend, leaving Kimberly to grow up without maternal guidance. This early loss seemed to strengthen her resolve to provide a different experience for her own child, one filled with love, stability, and opportunity. Friday, April 4th, 2014, began as many days do, with small pleasures and ordinary moments that would later be remembered with poignancy. Kimberly spent the afternoon having her hair styled and her nails done small indulgences that brought her joy. Afterward, she visited her sister Marquita's home. There was a lightness in her step and a brightness in her expression as she prepared for an evening out with her boyfriend Danny. Marquita would be looking after Kimberly's daughter. During this time, allowing the young mother an evening of relaxation and enjoyment. With a cheerful farewell, Kimberly left her sister's residence, looking forward to the night ahead, unaware that it would be their final goodbye. The soft light of early morning on Saturday, April 5th, 2014, approximately 6:40 a.m., found a cyclist passing through the 1900 block of 3rd Avenue near the F.M. Smith Recreation Center. This individual noticed something unusual, a form that shouldn't have been there lying still on the ground. Upon closer inspection, the cyclist realized with growing concern that it was a person. Authorities were immediately contacted. Oakland police officers were dispatched to the location, soon joined by personnel from the Oakland Fire Department and paramedics. Despite their collective expertise and earnest efforts to assist the unresponsive woman, there was regrettably nothing that could be done to help her. She was pronounced deceased at the scene, the quiet morning now marked by the solemnity that accompanies such discoveries. Near where she lay, investigators found a sweater which was carefully collected as potential evidence. Curiously, they also discovered a receipt for garden supplies, an ordinary item that would later prove significant. Identification found with the woman revealed her to be Kimberly Robertson, the young mother who had set out so happily the previous evening. Her face showed signs of having been beaten, and bruising on her hands and arms suggested she had attempted to defend herself against her attacker. Her jewelry and mobile phone were no longer with her, having apparently been taken. When Kimberly hadn't returned home as expected, her sister Marquita had not been immediately concerned, assuming her sibling had chosen to stay at her boyfriend's residence. The reality, when revealed by detectives who visited her, was devastating, beyond words. The body discovered earlier that morning was indeed Kimberly. As Marquita processed this heartbreaking news, she maintained one certainty amid her grief. Kimberly's boyfriend Danny could not have been responsible for this tragedy. She knew in her heart that he was not capable of such an act. Investigators, following standard procedure, promptly brought Danny in for questioning. He remained composed as he explained to officers that while he and Kimberly hadn't been dating for an extended period, they had maintained a friendship for several months prior to beginning their romantic relationship. On the previous evening, they had been enjoying drinks together at the Lakeside Lounge, an establishment located at 338 East 18th Street. Danny recounted that after their time at the venue, he had been concerned about driving home, given the alcohol they had consumed. Kimberly, however, disagreed with his assessment, which led to a disagreement between them. According to Danny, he had called for a taxi, but Kimberly had walked away, insisting she would find her own way home, not wanting to leave her alone, particularly at that hour. Danny said he had declined the taxi and instead retrieved his car from where it was parked. He then drove to a location opposite the bus stop, where Kimberly was waiting, and decided to remain there to ensure her safety. According to his account, he eventually fell asleep in his vehicle, and upon waking later, discovered that Kimberly was no longer at the bus stop. As detectives worked to verify Danny's narrative, preliminary results from the medical examiner arrived. These findings indicated that Kimberly had suffered significant head injuries that had resulted in a brain hemorrhage. The examination also revealed evidence that she had been sexually assaulted before her death. Meanwhile, friends and acquaintances, upon learning of Kimberly's passing, left heartfelt tributes on her social media pages, expressing shock and sorrow at her sudden departure. One friend wrote, "It's hard to smile knowing you're gone, but my heart is smiling inside because I know you're in a far better place than this cold world." These words captured the sense of loss felt by many who had known the vibrant young woman. The investigation continued as police sought witnesses who might have been present at the Lakeside Lounge on the evening of April 4th. Upon arriving at the establishment, they discovered something potentially more valuable than eyewitness accounts. Security cameras that had recorded events as they unfolded. Footage from outside the venue showed Danny and Kimberly entering at approximately 11:30 p.m. Interestingly, the recordings revealed a noticeable tension between the couple with minimal interaction between them as they arrived. Danny was subsequently seen conversing with two women while Kimberly used her phone nearby, further suggesting some discord between them. Additional footage captured the pair as they moved through the establishment later, showing them departing with another man at approximately 1:15 a.m. Investigators consulted with Kimberly's sister, who identified this individual as one of Danny's friends. When questioned, this friend confirmed having been with the couple that evening and stated he had accompanied them back to the parking lot at approximately 1:24 a.m., where their vehicle was situated. Investigators were pleased to discover that the parking lot was adjacent to a Walgreens pharmacy, which maintained security cameras for safety purposes. Beginning their review at 1:24 a.m., they examined over 20 minutes of footage with no sign of Danny or Kimberly. Then, at 1:50 a.m., a taxi appeared in the frame. Danny was observed entering the vehicle, after which Kimberly approached and took the passenger seat. After remaining stationary for approximately 30 seconds, Kimberly exited the vehicle and walked away from it. The taxi then departed the area with Danny still inside. Another camera angle showed Kimberly returning to the parking area after leaving the taxi. 1 minute later, the taxi returned to the location, possibly indicating that Danny was searching for Kimberly. The vehicle departed once more before returning yet again. 2 minutes after this third appearance, Danny exited the taxi, which then left the area permanently. Kimberly was not visible in this portion of the footage. Shortly after 2:00 a.m., cameras recorded a black SUV leaving the parking area. This was identified as Danny's vehicle. His account of the evening's events appeared to be aligning with the evidence being uncovered. Investigators proceeded to the bus stop, where Danny claimed Kimberly had been waiting before he fell asleep in his car. Fortunately, this location was also under camera surveillance. The footage showed his vehicle arriving and parking opposite the bus stop, exactly as he had described in his statement. The car remained in that position throughout the night, with Danny not emerging until 6:18 a.m. His statement had been corroborated by the video evidence. He had not been involved in Kimberly's death. The surveillance footage from a nearby bank, which captured Danny's parked SUV, also provided a partial view of the bus stop via reflection. At approximately 2:05 a.m., just moments after Danny had parked, a red Toyota 4Runner SUV was observed passing the bus stop on the opposite side of the road. The vehicle then turned around and drove past once more. Upon reviewing earlier portions of the footage, investigators noticed that this same vehicle had circled the area multiple times, exhibiting behavior that raised concerns about the driver's intentions. The reflected image from the bus stop revealed something particularly troubling. The red vehicle had stopped at the bus stop, and someone standing there, presumably Kimberly, appeared to converse briefly with the driver before entering the vehicle. The SUV then executed a U-turn and drove past Danny's car, with a passenger now visible inside. Investigators strongly suspected this passenger was Kimberly, unaware of the danger that awaited her. Unfortunately, the footage was not clear enough to identify the license plate of the red Toyota. Investigators asked Kimberly's acquaintances if anyone recognized the vehicle or might know its owner, but no one did. The next logical location to check was the FM Smith Recreation Center, where Kimberly's body had been discovered hours later. This location, too, had surveillance cameras in place. Beginning at 2:30 a.m., they reviewed the footage, hoping to identify the red Toyota as it passed by. At 3:00 a.m., the vehicle was indeed recorded driving along the road near the recreation center, though the license plate remained indiscernible in this footage as well. While the video evidence was helpful in establishing a timeline and confirming the presence of the suspect vehicle in relevant locations, it provided insufficient information for a conclusive identification of the driver. Investigators then turned their attention to another piece of evidence: the receipt discovered near Kimberly's body. It was from a Lowe's home improvement store, dated March 23, 2014, at 6:02 p.m. Notably, this store was located approximately 100 miles from where Kimberly had been found. Though it seemed unlikely that surveillance footage from 2 weeks prior would still be available, investigators contacted the store with their inquiry, hoping for a fortunate turn in the case. Remarkably, the store had retained the surveillance recordings from that date at 5:37 p.m. on March 23, 2014. Cameras had captured the red Toyota 4Runner SUV in the parking area of the Lowe's store. Two men had exited the vehicle and entered the establishment. Checkout footage showed the purchase had been completed using a credit card. Tracing this card led to a 53-year-old woman, suggesting the card might have been used without proper authorization. Records indicated the same card had been used just 3 hours later at a fast food restaurant not far from the home improvement store. As the red Toyota pulled into that location, investigators finally obtained a clearer image of the driver. Though the license plate remained difficult to read, the restaurant employee helpfully informed them that footage from a rear camera might provide better clarity of the vehicle's identifying information. This recording did indeed offer a clearer view of the license plate, which was subsequently traced to an Oakland resident. The man's name was Prince Che, though he was commonly known as Frank Bourne in Ghana. He had relocated to Oakland in 2007. At 41 years of age, he earned his living selling clothing at local farmers markets. He was married and had 3 children. Further investigation revealed that the passenger seen in the earlier footage at the Lowe's store had been in custody at the time when Kimberly was killed, immediately eliminating him as a suspect in her death. Attention now focused exclusively on Frank. To gather more information without alerting him to their suspicions, undercover officers distributed flyers throughout his neighborhood, asking residents if they had any information about the recently murdered young woman. Eventually, they knocked on his apartment door Number 8. They explained they were investigating the recent murder of a young woman and showed him Kimberly's photograph, asking if he recognized her or had seen her in the area. Despite evidence suggesting she had been in his vehicle, Frank denied knowing her or having seen her previously. The officers provided contact information for the Oakland Police Department should he recall anything relevant to their investigation. After confirming his identity, they departed now, certain he was the individual captured in the surveillance footage from multiple locations. His denial of knowing Kimberly, when evidence suggested otherwise, provided sufficient grounds for arrest. He was taken into custody 5 days after the discovery of Kimberly's body. During formal questioning, he was asked to explain his suspicious driving behavior on the night of Kimberly's death. Frank stated he had been experiencing ongoing marital difficulties, causing him to spend time away from home during evening hours. When directly asked if he had ever seen or met Kimberly, he responded, I don't remember. She had a long wig. She had a long weave on. I don't remember her face. His account then changed significantly. He acknowledged having met Kimberly and giving her a ride that evening. He claimed they had engaged in a consensual encounter after she had allegedly offered intimacy in exchange for money. According to Frank, he had then dropped her off at her request and driven away, denying any involvement in her subsequent death, as his story had now changed materially, and considering the circumstances of Kimberly's death, he was formally charged with murder, with the special circumstance of committing a murder during a sexual assault. Additional evidence soon strengthened the case against him. Laboratory analysis confirmed that his DNA matched biological material found on Kimberly's body. He was held without bond at the Santa Rita jail until his trial could proceed. In court, Frank maintained that he had encountered Kimberly at the bus stop near East 18th Street and Park Boulevard in the early morning hours of April 5th. While he continued to deny responsibility for her murder, he claimed she had offered intimacy for $250, stating she was working that evening. He said he had negotiated the amount to $200, after which they drove to a residential area where they engaged in relations in his vehicle. I didn't kill this woman. All I had was sex with her, he stated to the court. Frank testified that earlier that evening, he had attended a concert at the University of California at Berkeley with his wife and children. Upon returning home, his wife had expressed fatigue and declined intimacy with him. He explained that his initial denial to police regarding contact with Kimberly stemmed from his desire to keep this information from his wife, fearing it would further damage their already strained relationship. The defense argued that the prosecution had not proven beyond reasonable doubt that Frank was responsible for Kimberly's death, noting the absence of direct eyewitnesses to the crime. His attorney characterized his decision to pick up Kimberly as simply poor judgment, referring to their interaction as a brief encounter that was consensual in nature. The defense claimed that after spending approximately an hour with her, Frank had left Kimberly near the F.M. Smith Recreation Center around 3:00 a.m. before returning home. Having a one-night stand doesn't make you a rapist and doesn't make you a killer, and there's no evidence he had a motive to kill or hurt her, his lawyer stated to the jury. Frank added that he had noticed blood on Kimberly, and she had told him she had been involved in a disagreement with someone who had pushed her from a vehicle, but that she was essentially unharmed. During cross-examination, Frank acknowledged that his wife had been very upset with him regarding a previous extramarital relationship and had expressed a desire to end their marriage permanently. The prosecution acknowledged that their case relied on circumstantial evidence, but maintained that it was substantial and compelling when viewed collectively. They argued that the only reasonable conclusion was that Frank had assaulted and killed Kimberly that night. The evidence presented included several key points. Frank's wife having expressed her intention to end their relationship due to his history of infidelities, leaving him emotionally distressed. His red Toyota 4Runner SUV being recorded on security cameras, repeatedly circling the area where Kimberly had last been seen, suggesting predatory behavior. Him being the last person known to have seen her alive. The receipt for garden supplies found near her body, corresponding to his earlier purchase. The location where he claimed to have left her matching where her body was discovered, and his DNA being found on her person. After deliberating for less than 2 hours, the jury returned with their verdict. Frank was found guilty of first-degree murder, with the special circumstance of committing a murder during a sexual assault. He received a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The jury had evidently dismissed his characterization of Kimberly and his claims regarding the nature of their interaction. Despite his continued denials of wrongdoing, the judge observed that the jurors had came to the conclusion that you were just lying and you perjured yourself. They decided that you raped and killed her. The judge also noted that he had hoped Frank might show some remorse when given the opportunity to address the court, but added, "I don't think you have that kind of heart." These words reflected the court's assessment of Frank's character and the gravity of his actions. Kimberly's sister addressed Frank directly during the sentencing hearing, stating with quiet dignity, "You had a choice. You didn't have to kill her. I can never replace my sister. My life will never be the same." Her words captured the permanent void left by Kimberly's absence, a void that could never truly be filled. It is difficult to fully comprehend what Kimberly experienced in her final moments, or the profound impact her loss has had on those who loved her. Her young daughter now faces growing up without her mother's presence, much as Kimberly herself had experienced following her own mother's tragic death. This cycle of loss across generations adds an additional layer of poignancy to an already heartbreaking situation. Kimberly Robertson was a vibrant young woman with her entire future before her, a future filled with promise and potential. She had overcome early adversity and was working diligently to create a stable, positive life for herself and her daughter. She was studying, building relationships, and moving forward with hope and determination. Her story reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing each day we are given with those we love. The evidence that led to Frank's conviction demonstrates how modern investigative techniques, particularly surveillance footage and DNA analysis, can help bring closure in cases where traditional witnesses may be absent. While nothing can restore what was lost, the resolution of the case provides a measure of justice for Kimberly and those who continue to hold her memory dear. In the quiet moments between twilight and dawn, perhaps there is space to remember Kimberly, not for how her life ended, but for how she lived. With joy, with purpose, and with deep love for her child May, she rest in peace, and may those who miss her find comfort in their memories of brighter days.